Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren,
Ladies and gentlemen, students, welcome. Welcome to our panel, Industry 4.0 and Digitalization. Now, before I'll begin presenting the panel members, we quite often hear that Americans are world leaders in software, Asians are the world leader in hardware. They produce cheaply and send it to us, and we in Europe, we have the money. At least we still do. So we could say, as far as digitalization is concerned, the digital world is concerned, we might have been a bit slow during these past couple of years, but now during the Industry 4.0 we could be catching up. And this is something we want to talk about from different perspectives. My name is Werner Seeker. I work for Pulse 4 at Pulse 24, and I would like to present our panel. Isabella Meran-Waldstein, she's from the Austrian Federation of Industries. Welcome. Thank you very much.
dann freue ich mich sehr.
And then I'm happy to welcome our next guest, who is on his way to Tyrol, Florian, State Secretary for Digitalization. Welcome.
Dann kommen
And then Dietmar Böckmann, Managing Director of ERSTE Digital at Erste Bank. He is very optimistic as far as IT is concerned. He has 20 years of experience in management. He has experience in carrying out a large project. Good to have you.
Dann komme ich gleich zu Ihnen.
And then Klaus Garstenauer, he's a board member of ÖBB Passenger AG. He really knows his way around railway system. He studied electrical engineering, he studied economics, and he is responsible for making sure passengers get to where they want to go. Welcome.
Danke.
And then on my left-hand side, Andreas Klauser, CEO of PALFINGER AG. He had he started at Steyr and then in Turin, Italy, then the US, and now since 4 years he has been the CEO of PALFINGER. He's responsible for digital transition. Welcome. And then I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Juhan Pukk. He is president of the Estonian Association of Information Technology and Telecommunication, ITL. As far as Estonia is concerned, it used to be a former Soviet republic, and now Estonia is one of the most progressive digital societies worldwide. Even 20 years ago, the access to internet was enshrined as a human right in the Constitution. Welcome, Juhan Pukk. And I am welcoming Michael Weber, Vice President of Sales, EMENA Kapsch TrafficCom AG. He's welcome for a strategic project in a large region of Europe, the Middle East and also North Africa. And before that, he was responsible for Bulgaria, Kazakhstan, Poland, Russia, and Ukraine. Responsible with Kapsch TrafficCom. Welcome, Michael Weber.
Ich weiß nicht, ob Sie gestern
No, I don't know if you saw Pressestunde in ORF. Florian Tursky was an invited guest, and I think the program didn't focus enough on digitalization, because this is really what you focus on. And now you'll have the possibility to do that. Please start with your keynote address. Thank you very much. I don't want to speak for too long because we really have a very interesting panel here today. So I'm going to limit myself to a few thoughts. Today we're going to be talking about the opportunities digitalization holds for Austria. And I think one thing will be important and decisive: whether we will make use of the opportunities digitalization holds. But we also have to look at the dangers digitalization may mean for us and also for Europe. Let me try something at the beginning of my keynote speech, a little experiment. We're talking about different crises these days. Over the course of the 2.5 years, we talked about a health crisis, a pandemic that has influenced the industry, the economy, has posed a challenge to all of us. Right now, we're witnessing a war of aggression on European soil. The Russian Federation is leading a war and aggression in Ukraine. And since last February, it has really changed our way of thinking. And apart from the human suffering that we're seeing in Ukraine, this war is devastating for the industry, for society, and for the people. Prices are skyrocketing because of this war. Now, these are the crises we're looking at constantly, but we're also faced with two transitions. And sometimes we are not focusing on these transitions enough anymore. And I know that the guests on this panel, however, still think about these transitions each single day, the so-called twin transitions: the digital transition and then climate change, together with the energy transition. Now, these are two very big transitions. And the question is, how will we deal with these two big transitions? This will be decisive for our competitiveness here in Europe. Why do I think this is the case? Over the past couple of weeks and months, we've all heard a lot. We've all learned a lot about how dire the consequences can be when someone turns on and turns off the gas tap in Russia. We used to be very much dependent on Russian gas. But now let's try to think in a similar way, in an analog way for digitalization. Imagine if it wasn't the person in Russia turning the gas tap on and off also had access to our thermostats at the same time. This is why it's so important to make sure we're digitally sovereign in Europe. 92% of all data stored globally aren't stored in Europe, and we as Europeans don't have access to this data. 5 years ago, The Economist coined a very important phrase: data is the new oil. And this related to the start of the 20th century, when the industry completely depended on oil. In the future, the industry and our economy will fully be dependent on the access to data. This will concern everyone, from the small carpenter to the big multinational. Everything will depend on whether you have access to data and can deal with that data, or whether it's a foreign company, a foreign political system. Right now, we're witnessing tensions between the US and China, whether they can block the access to data and severely hamper our competitiveness. We are looking at this on a European level. We're forging new rules for digitalization, data management systems. Gaia X is something some of you may have heard about. I think this will be decisive in determining our competitiveness for the future, because digitalization works in a similar way as globalization, which I'm a proponent of. At some point, we will realize the mistakes we've made, the errors we've made during the past few months. There were certain errors that were committed during globalization and that became very present for us. There was a problem with a ship on the Suez Canal. No masks were being produced in Europe anymore, and there's only one site at which penicillin is produced anymore in Europe, in Kufstein, where I am from, and we cannot repeat these same mistakes with digitalization. Digitalization frightens people, just like people were afraid of globalization at one point. People are afraid of losing their jobs, of being left behind. Now, the simple answer that many populists put forward, and as is often the case, this answer is the wrong answer. This answer is, let's just not take part in this. We don't need digitalization. We can live without digitalization. Now, the question whether our society will become a digital one really is not a question that anyone is asking right now, because it's something we cannot prevent. And we should really think about how we can make sure that our economy remains competitive in a digital future. And I think we have to look at those opportunities as politicians. We have to come up with the necessary rules and attract the necessary talents. We have to make sure that our educational system is adapted. People need to be brought on board the digital transition. We need to make it simple for them. We need to show people how they can benefit from the digitalization during their daily lives. And then, of course, we have to educate the brightest amongst us. The Technical University of Linz is such a good example for this. It has faced a lot of criticism in the media, but I will always be a proponent of any educational institution that deals with digitalization. At the end of the day, it will be about using those opportunities. This will determine our prosperity, and this will determine whether Europe will be a winner or loser in the game of digitalization. Thank you very much.
Vielen herzlichen Dank an Florian Tursky.
Thank you very much, Florian Tursky, State Secretary for Digitalization in Austria. But let's start with a little experiment. We have many young men and women here. If you feel well educated digitally, please raise your hand. And I'm not talking about Facebook and Instagram here. But this is reason for hope, I think. Well, there still is a problem. People in Austria tend to think too much of themselves sometimes. I don't want to say this about anyone present here, but for the very first time, we've objectively looked into the digital skills of Austrians, and on a scale from 1 to 100, Austrians ended up at 44th place, but when you ask people about self-assessment, they think they're in a 77th place. And the colleagues present here today on the panel know this. The human factor is why cyber attacks are still so successful, so we have a lot to do as far as education is concerned. Well, Isabella Meran-Waldstein, here with the Austrian Federation of Industries. Many young people are here today. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about industry in Austria? It's quite often not very visible, but there are many important companies that keep our country running. And you just heard what the state secretary has said. How is the industry dealing with digitalization? What are you doing in order to avoid the errors that were made during the phase of globalization? Thank you very much. Maybe let me start with the very first question. Let me just tell you about the industry and what it means for our economy. Now, Austria is one of the most highly industrialized countries in Europe. Between 22 to 25 percent of our value is created in our industry. This is very important for prosperity in Austria. The jobs of the future will still be located in the industry, and we have to make sure that they survive. And this is why digitalization is so important. The State Secretary just mentioned it. The industry is facing multiple crises. We're facing the energy crisis, as well as a labor shortage. We need both blue and white collar workers. And of course, we're facing the energy crisis as well. Now, these are very current topics, but we also have to think about the future. We also have to think about tomorrow. And in this context, we have to think about how much are we investing in research, technology, and innovation, especially digitalization, of course. Do you think we're investing enough in these areas? Well, 2/3 of all research expenditure are private means. This means 2 out of 3 euros are private sector investments, and the industry finances around 50% of this. So this really shows that we're very committed. And why can we do this? Because our conditions are so good. Research conditions are very good. But these conditions that we benefit from are conditions we have to keep up. We carried out a survey amongst companies recently, and we saw that companies invested during the Corona crisis in F&I. They've increased their investments by 2 to 3%, and they anticipate doing this during the next couple of years as well. And of course, very many prominent companies are presented here in the panel, but AT&S, Infineon, Bernia, Bernicon, Rainer, ABB are just a few of those companies. More is being invested, but the general conditions have to be the right ones. And an important step has been taken. The federal government has decided on a transition offensive. And it is to be implemented soon, and we need to make sure we really get a push on research and technology as a part of this initiative, because we need it. You just said it, we have the money. We need to make sure that we make the right investments, because otherwise the twin transitions won't be successful in the industry. Now, let me make sure we all know what we're talking about exactly. State Secretary, how much are we investing in digitalization currently? Could you give us an idea? Well, thank God we have more money available now for digitalization. The twin transitions were named more than 4 billion euros. 1.4 billion are currently being invested in expanding our glass fiber network. I think this is very important to make sure that everyone has the same opportunities in our economy. 400 millions were added to that by 2026, and we're also adding another 800 million for the different digitalization projects that we're carrying out. But all the ministries are really responsible for digitalization. It's not just me. So we have to come up with common projects. We need projects for companies and for the population. I'm thinking about administrational procedures. We need to make sure that processes are sped up, that the public administration is a digital one, that you don't physically have to go to government offices. And other countries are much further ahead of us here. Estonia, for example, last week I attended the Digital Summit in Tallinn. I talked with the Estonian Minister for Digitalization, and Estonia really is a step ahead of us here. And the administration that we have in Austria is a very traditional one. we have European benchmarks in many areas, but all of that wasn't interconnected. And now we want to make sure that the e-government can work every single day in people's daily lives. Now, 1.8 billion euros. Well, 1.8 billion euros for expanding our broadband network. Then the private economy is investing 6 billion, and then 800 million in addition to digital projects. Now, the young people, don't tell this to your grandparents, but 140 billion will be needed by 2030 to fund our pensions. What do you think about that? Well, I think our government is there to ensure people's pensions. But at the same time, we need to invest in the future, and we do this. Well, you mentioned Estonia, and before we look at more Austrian companies, I'd like to have a look at Estonia. Juhan Pukk, the state secretary, already mentioned it. Estonia has a digital tradition. Now, Estonia faced a large challenge, but also had a big opportunity. After 1990, you had the opportunity to start fresh. Was that really an advantage? Was that the reason why you're a leader in digitalization now?
I just got the question. Thank you. And sorry for speaking in English. My German is not that good yet. That's a good question. Was it an advantage? Today, looking back, for sure. It was. But the case was that we didn't have any money. We were so poor. We couldn't hire the people to work in the offices, so people could go and walk there. Our president and some of other people were very fond of digitalization, the IT, etc. And then they thought that let's do a digital country, so we don't have to pay for the people. We did it, and it worked. Nobody knows how. Eventually, it worked. And now we're having the fruits of that, and hearing numbers in Austria, in Estonia per year we have up to 250 million for the whole e-governance, or e-Estonia as we call it. So we have to do more with less, and that's what we used to. And I think that that's one of the things why Estonian startups are so famous as well, because they are just used to spend less than, for example, American ones.
Sehr, sehr spannend. Also, da was dann vielleicht.
Very interesting. So this was certainly an opportunity was brought about by history, and you were able to do more with less. Let's talk to Andreas Klauser. You're the CEO of PALFINGER. You were in Steyr, Turin, and the USA. Now, I think Austria is actually doing quite well, but Estonia is still better. Question. Why aren't we at the top yet? Is it a lack of money? Are people just not educated well enough? Is it the traditions? Well, I think there's a certain degree of self-complacency that we like to indulge in Austria. In the past, this has worked very well. We've always been successful. But then we had to face the corona crisis. We have the war in Ukraine and other crises. And this is an opportunity for us to continue to develop further. It's a wake-up call for us in Europe. If you compare this with the US, then I would have to say things always were different there. Many people needed to take on a second job in order to make ends meet. And the US is a very innovative country, but it's not very effective when it comes to implementing new ideas in the industry. So we in Europe really have an opportunity here, because if we are innovative, we can very effectively implement our new ideas as well. And this really goes out to the younger participant here as well. It was because when you just asked the question earlier about digital skills, only the young people raised their hands. Maybe this was my mistake. I only called upon the young people. But I think this is really a large opportunity. And I think that we really have a good educational system in Austria. But we have to focus and play to our strengths and have to invest in the areas where we can grow further. Of course, we have to look at what the trends of the future are, but I think our educational system is better than we often like to believe. And the US, usually in the US, people look to Europe and are envious of Europe because here we have opportunities that in the US you only have if you have enough money. And this was we've really heard the wake-up call now. We really have to look to the future and really have to develop further in order to be successful. And I think if you have the good educational system, if you have the companies that do their fair share as far as data storage and cybersecurity is concerned, not just cybersecurity, because this is still a big threat, but I think and this is something I'm saying to the State Secretary, as far as cybersecurity is concerned, we need better measures.
Zu Cybersecurity sprechen.
Well, perhaps we can have a few more specific remarks on cybersecurity. We have an Estonian contribution to this already and things that we may not know in Austria. In any case, we'll come back to that. Cybersecurity. At the time, the ÖVP party in Austria did quite a bit in this direction, and I think that in Austria, things are going very well for the Austrian railway, and it's really in a very good position. And so why is that the case? What have you been doing right? Well, I would say that we have been able to consistently grow over the past years, and certainly that is a challenge we still have to live up to. We want a mobility change, and we can only realize that if we continue to grow despite the fact that there are many bottlenecks in the field of energy and staff and so forth. We have a good plan, though, as a company. And as a company, we want to increase our performance as a company by 100%, i.e. to double our performance. That means we need more people, we need more raw material, and we need digitalization above all. And we have to optimize our capital investments, and our capacity has to be used to the full, and our productivity has to be increased thereby. What that means on the rail, or rather, what does that mean for me as a passenger traveling by rail? Well, it means, of course, in the interface to our passengers that our system has to remain attractive, even when there are more passengers traveling by rail. And that means easy accessibility to our system via digital cross-sections. And that means you have to have a good structure. If you don't have a good structure, digitalization will not be a success. I think that's the first thing you have to realize. So a good digitalization strategy is based on simplify, connect, and act. Those are your three mantras: simplify, connect, and act. And based on that, we can become agile, and we can focus on an input-output relation that needs to be implemented. And for our passengers, what that means ultimately is that they will have easier access to reservations and to the information they need, and that our digital service will work better and better. I just heard from you today that my train is going back to Vienna 1808, and on the way in Innsbruck, there's something I need to keep in mind as to further passengers that will be boarding from such and such. a track. So that seems to be an awful lot of information. Well, yes, we are offering more information than ever before. Our ticket shop is not just a place where you reserve, you also get lots of information. So with one click, you can make your reservation, you buy your ticket and reserve your seat on the train, and our ÖBB Live function will also show you how full your train is going to be. And first of all, of course, it'll show you where your seat is, or if you haven't reserved a seat, you'll have an overview of where the most available seats might be on that train. Well, thank you very much for that. Let's move on to the ERSTE Bank, a very important rising star bank. And perhaps I can ask you a kind of provocative question. ERSTE Bank is one of the first digitalized banks, whereas some banks, which are still doing well, are sending out paper bank statements still. So I wonder what that looks like in comparison. What are you going to do as a next step at ERSTE Bank? Well, first of all, let me just say in favor of my entire bank industry that banks were one of the first digitalized industries that even started back in the 60s and 70s, because even back then it was possible to send bank transfer amounts without actual paper money being involved. So it goes back that far. And now, of course, what is important to us is to get closer and closer to our customers and make our services attractive for them. And that is what we've been working on and investing in the last years and decades. In 6 countries, we're now active with 8 million customers. And of course, that is a platform that we'll be building on in future. One of our central strategies is called networking. And it's based on the thesis that, or the premise that practically the second most important thing in your life is your financial health after your physical health. And we use technology in order to promote financial health as a target for each and every one of our customers. We want to give them better information, better advice, better consulting. How can they improve their financial health? How can they protect their financial health? And therefore, we're massively investing in artificial intelligence and continuing to improve in that respect. And as you've already heard, we're a forerunner and we're always looking towards the future. Just a few weeks ago, we decided on a partnership strategy with IBM. And that's very exciting for us, having become Nobel Prize winners. And now we have more attention focused on us. And that means that we have quite some potential to draw on for the next coming years. Well, many of our financial data are in the United States, apparently, but you keep your data in Europe, don't you? Yes, we have 3 big computing centers in Vienna, and we're really investing in our technology, as I said, and our focus in our business is on data security. That is what a bank has to do. And of course, this data security has to be focused on. And when European initiatives support that, we can only be pleased. I don't think we're going to have enough of those initiatives soon enough, but nevertheless, I hope that we'll be able to make quicker progress than in the past in that respect. Yes, please go ahead. Something interesting for the banking sector, which I learned in Estonia and in Ukraine. Banks are very important for e-government. We all know that 20 years ago, everyone was afraid of e-banking, but in the meantime, everyone's doing it because it's so much easier. In Estonia, this whole digital identity was built, and the law said that you can only transfer more than 400 euros, more or less, if you do it digitally. And in Ukraine, it's even simpler. your bank accesses your access to your digital identity. So they've gone even further. And that is something that we need to build on, and we'll be cooperating with them more and more in the coming years, I'm sure. And we really need an absolutely secure, identifiable identity on the internet for each of us. Well, let's move on before we come to the Estonian example to Mr. Weber. I mean, we know that your company is a company with a long tradition. It's one that has always remained a forerunner in many areas, but has also been able to carry forward its traditional historical aspects. Not too long ago, you were in Dubai at a big international fair. So what is the hype that has that you've been able to bring back from that fair, which covered an incredible amount of different technologies and companies? Well, our company has been around for many years now. It keeps reinventing itself. And probably all telephones in the beginning in Austria were Kapsch telephones from our company. And now things have changed a bit. And we no longer have the profile of being boring civil servants, but rather we've turned into a really exciting private company. And not only are we known for our road toll system here in Europe, but we work all over the world, in the United States and elsewhere. And I was at Chitex, as you just mentioned. It was so exciting. 4 days of interacting with thousands, millions of people even, and the hologram technology that I was able to witness there, and even at Kapsch, where we're really quite progressive, we were amazed to see some of the things that were exhibited there about communication between vehicles, about fiberglass extensions. So this digital phase is extremely important. We're now moving towards much more software and much less hardware, and especially on roads, there's so much movement, so much mobility, and then we need lots of young talent in this area who are willing to train and qualify. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the Austrian Federation of Industries. Ms. Meran-Waldstein, you said earlier that things are going quite well and we can actually be quite satisfied with ourselves. Well, yes, that's okay. We can be satisfied, but let's not lean back and just watch what others are doing, because things are progressing very quickly. And as has been said today, crises can also be an opportunity. Back in 2013, we may have thought that digitalization was going to cost people their jobs, but in the meantime, things have completely turned around. At the time when we pointed to demographics, no one believed us, and now people aren't able to find enough qualified staff. So it's important to become active and not just watch what's happening. We have to intervene. And looking at the situation today, one thing is clear. Those with a higher rate of digitalization fared better during the crisis, at least so far. And it really doesn't matter if you're an SME or a large company. I would say that at digitalization level 1, 2, or 3 has been a level at which companies have fared very well, and you have to have a digital company model and a digital data strategy in order to make it on the market today. And it's very important, therefore, that companies continue to move forward in this direction. And this is very intensely linked to 3 issues. First of all, artificial intelligence. That's important. I mean, just think of Siri, artificial language, but there are also many other opportunities. You mentioned banks, but there's manufacturing as well, and resource efficiency improvement. I mean, all of the TRIPS areas are involved here. The second aspect is data. So data is a big issue because what do I make of data? How can I make data that makes sense? And the third issue is cybersecurity, because here at this, we need to continue growing simultaneously because this massive networking brings along major opportunities, but also major security risks. So we have to watch out. Where we have problems in Austria is in the respect that we are a very diverse society in terms of technology, and we need to improve on that. We need to become more digitally educated. But on the other hand, we also need to make sure that we don't just sit back and wait. We need to move forward. This is an industry which is extremely agile, and we can see that leading companies are moving very quickly, but at the same time, the value chains and the manufacturing chains have to be maintained and must become robust. And of course, the competition is very intense. If you look at Europe versus Asia and versus the United States, with respect to the platform industry and value chains, so 70% in the United States, 20% in Asia, and in Europe, we're only at 3 or 4%. So there's really no time to lose. I'm sorry. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 3 or 4% for digital value in Europe. I mean, that's very little, but the big players, Facebook, Google, Apple, of course, they're not in Europe, unfortunately for us. Yes, and as the State Secretary just said, the issue of data may turn into a crisis issue if we don't proactively try to solve it, because, of course, it's all about where is the data? How is it accessible? And that's not something that we should just wait and expect it to solve itself. Well, that was important, and education is an important issue. And let's move back to the railways and the banks, which are a front runner and one of the first digitalization areas. But let's also move to the PALFINGER company. We just heard from Ms. Meran-Waldstein that digitalization has to run through the whole company. What about your company? I mean, you make cranes. What kind of data is involved there, and do you collect it, or what do you do? Well, we have many automatic processes, because digitalization isn't starting now, it started long ago. If, for example, you're loading a tree trunk, then the crane does that based on an automatic process, and you can use relatively low qualified staff to operate that crane or those vehicles and equipment. However, we can learn a lot from our younger staff and the younger participants at this conference here today with respect to how data can be transferred, how messages can be forwarded, how work instructions and instruction manuals for our products can be made more accessible and can be conveyed from one to the next. And PALFINGER, of course, is a company that uses all sorts of new technology like drones and artificial intelligence, digital cameras, to identify, for example, if there's damage at a bridge. We were recently able to attract Metro Los Angeles as one of our customers, and therefore, I think we're really moving forward. What would you say? I think there's some Austrian companies that are still traditional, conventional companies. Construction machinery, for example. And they invest a lot, but they don't seem to be very digitalized. What about PALFINGER, your company? Are you one of the companies that has lots of new solutions to offer? Well, I would say that yes, we're certainly one of the front runners, and not only in terms of marketing. Bauma is the biggest construction machine fair in the whole world, and it's already started in Munich. And there, I think we demonstrated that, or we'll be able to demonstrate that we're certainly way up front with our technology. And it's important to see and to ensure in future that our technicians, our engineers are qualified and know how to deal with these new challenges. And of course, our education system has to provide for that. Otherwise, we won't have the right basis. So we're up front, we're front runners. But if we want to stay there, if we want to continue to grow, then we need that educational background. Thank you. Mr. State Secretary, many exciting statements have already been made. You already said in your keynote address earlier that about 80% of data are not even in Europe. Is that possible? Technically, maybe yes, but is it politically possible? Is it conceivable that this data might be brought back to Europe? I'm thinking of Facebook and their lobbying work and strength. So is it even possible that that data might actually come back to Europe? Or is all we can do that we try and hang on to the 20% that is still here? Well, I think the question is what's going to happen with future data, because every year worldwide data is doubled. So let's not talk about the data that's already gone elsewhere. Let's think about the future data. I think two things will not work. It will not work to say we're now going to build our own Facebook, or we're now going to build our own Amazon. Amazon didn't work in Austria anyway. They gave up too soon, didn't they? In any case, that will not be our approach. Our approach will be this. We'll need two things. First of all, the ones that are here have to be regulated so that it's not possible for certain kinds of data to be outside Europe, and that won't be possible for these European companies that produce this data, or the people to which that data belongs may not be separated from that data. For example, if Microsoft builds up something in Europe, which is just happening, or if Google invests here, then of course that's wonderful that they're investing here, and we shouldn't say it's a bad thing, but we need to have European regulations that ensure that when someone wants to delete data, it is deleted. And that has to be ensured. So a future Google or a future Facebook has to provide for these possibilities. And these companies have to be able to develop here in Europe. And that's what we have to build on. For example, lots have been said about quantum computing. We know that we have European universities in Innsbruck, for example, that are front runners. And when something is produced there, we have to make sure that it doesn't go straight to the United States, because that's where the money is, that's where the funds are that can invest in these new ideas, so that people take them to the United States to have them developed. That is what we need to avoid. And the second thing is that we need to build data management systems that work. Gaia X was already mentioned in France. And what we need to do is have standards that work in European data traffic. So it's not just about clouds, and they're not just another guy's computer, these clouds, but rather we need to set up standards based on which a European data management system can actually be set up. Okay, so let's go to Estonia. And Mr. Pukk, I don't know if any of you have been to the Baltic states. They're worth a trip. It's a wonderful part of the world, good food and nice people. And what they have in Estonia is forest and flat land. I think 3 million inhabitants in Estonia. So 1.5, thank you very much. So that's almost smaller than the city of Vienna. And as far as digitalization is concerned, I could even become an Estonian resident. So it means I don't have to ever have been to Estonia, but I can digitally almost become an Estonian citizen if I found a startup there. Could you perhaps tell us more about that?
Let's clarify some of the things said before as well regarding the security, the cybersecurity. Estonia is rather well known about not that friendly neighbor that attacks us once in a while. And most of people know the 2007 attacks when something happened. 1 month ago, the attacks from that same neighbor were more than 10 times bigger, and nothing happened. We were prepared. So it is possible to be a front runner and be ahead of those attacks. And of course, every system that you build is totally secure until it's not. When it's proven that it's not. Until that, it's totally secure. So this is about the security. The NATO Cybersecurity Center is in Tallinn. So we do have the talent and know-how about the security, and that's very important for us and helps a lot. Now, regarding the question you just asked, e-residency. Estonia, as you told, is a rather small country. Not the smallest, but not the biggest one in the world. So we thought we should have more residents. And as we don't want to bring everybody to Estonia, we can do the e-residency program. So that everybody can be an e-resident and have the e-residency card. So it means that you can sign all the papers digitally. By law, it's okay in European Union. I still don't understand why everybody else doesn't use that. I just don't get it how it's possible to live without that. And of course, as you said, 97% of all the actions between people and the government are done online. So no papers at all. And if you want to do a startup, how long it takes to establish a company in Austria? I don't know. That was a question.
Das wissen viele von uns ja überhaupt.
Many of us have no idea how to answer that, I'm afraid, even though we are Austrians. Some people say it takes too long.
It takes 18 minutes. And with a bank account, 25, with a bad connection. So that's why people come to Estonia and want to have it. It's really easy, and you get all the paperwork done digitally, so no paper. In Estonia, we have calculated how much less workforce we need to do the paperwork, as we're digital. And these amounts are big. And of course, the environmental action there as well, that is concerned. And that just being digital is let's say the Estonian already in our Estonian approach is to be digital and do everything digitally. So coming an e-resident, you can have all those possibilities and still live where you are. Nowadays, there are a lot of digital nomads that travel around the world, want to invoice somewhere here, somewhere there. If you have a company in Estonia and they're e-resident, you can do all that online.
Also sehr spannend, in Estland kann man binnen 18 Minuten.
Well, that is very exciting. In 18 to 25 minutes, you can become an e-resident or found a company. That seems to be very different in Austria. And of course, you love digital things, but is that something that you can imagine happening in Austria, this e-residency thing, or founding a company in 18 to 25 minutes? Well, I think much is and will be possible. And it's possible, I think, or will soon be possible to found a company online. We have to improve on various things. For example, the collocation of data, the links between data. It simply can't be that you have to go to all sorts of different offices, for example, in order to declare that you're unemployed, or in order to apply for child support. Here, I think our population is demanding that things change, because our population expects us to do better in this respect. And then the second thing is, and here Ukraine is really very far advanced, and that is usability. Last week I was in Berlin and had a long talk with the German Minister of the Interior, and she said we should have public authorities, but they need to be sexy. Well, that sounds good, but what about our e-government app? And we could say that it's as easy to use as Tinder. But what does our population want? Our population wants e-government to be as easy to use as a smartphone app. Because if it's easy, then people will use it. And that's what we do today. We have over 200 transactions with public authorities that can be done digitally, but people don't know that it's possible. And as long as people don't know, they won't do it. Now we have to put everything on a platform and make usability easier. Digital driver's license, for example, that is possible now. We have to put all of our identification cards on our mobile phone, for example, and everything has to be accessible by clicking once on an app. And that will be digitalization that is useful to people, because obviously the thing is that you have to be able to show your identity, and that means having access to your birth certificate, and you need to be able to access it and not have to go to a public authority first and apply for a copy. And that is the service that an authority needs to offer, because it's clear that in future, this is something that we have to offer our public.
Dann gehörte sich eben, dass einem der
And so then it's also necessary, for instance, that you receive automatically this offer, a project just launched in Estonia. You get automatically information what can be done, what is on offer, and for instance, maternity leave or paternity leave, this is automatically informed. This is how I see, of course, administration, and it's a vision, of course, and it's our aim in Austria. Yes, but let me mention favorable that 4 months ago my daughter was born, and then you, of course, have to officially register your child. You can't avoid this. And they said, well, it's COVID, you just send in everything digitally. There was an input mask which could be used easily, and it worked very well. And then I didn't hear anything. And then I thought, well, let's wait a while. But then everything came, all the documents, even the e-card, all that came automatically, even with a letter. And my 4-week-old daughter could not sign it yet.
I 100% agree with you that more and more people get the expression of using e-stuff from Facebook, from Tinder, whatever they use. And for example, Meta or Facebook, however you call it, they spend 20 billion euros per year for the development. And that's what people are used to. That's what they are using. And they are expecting the same experience from the governmental sector, from private companies like here in panel. And the expectations have to meet the possibilities. So there might be a gap, but there are possibilities, of course.
Da kommen wir langsam aber sicher zu einem Thema, das noch ein bisschen...
which takes us to a topic which we have not mentioned so far, that's safety and security. Back to you, Mr. Böckmann. I've asked you in the preliminary talks, how is it? We have a bank which has to be secure. I fully trust 150% our banks in Austria. Has there ever been a problem in all these digital tasks? But you even said maybe it wouldn't be so bad in the next few months to have some cash at home. What about safety and security? Because if you have no power, I cannot do my banking any longer. That's highly complex and must not be underestimated. So what about cybersecurity and also the today's situation? Do ERSTE Bank already prepare for that? Well, these are two topics, cyber defense and the possibility of a blackout. Cyber defense was introduced extremely by us 10 or 20 years ago. We invest enormous sums into the topic of cyber defense. We currently observe our systems and see whether they can actually shield attacks. So far we have defended everything, and many work in this department with us. They also work at the University of Applied Sciences and then recruit new talent. So this helps us, of course, improve our cybersecurity, and many authorities even ask us what we have done. So there we are very well prepared. The second topic, a possible blackout. This has been mentioned everywhere and also in our preliminary talks. Yes, if there is a blackout, and this more or less is defined, there is no immediate cash supply, that's obvious. And we know, as discussed before, the Austrians are very traditionalistic, and I can tell you that at lockdown number 1 there was an extreme run for cash, and this even kept us awake during a few nights, so that we had enough money in the ATMs and in the banks. And if you anticipate a possible blackout, probably many people will go to the bank, but the bank won't be open in a traditional way. There are 3 factors which are important. First, our central data centers, which of course will operate on emergency power. And we would also have enough stars if there is a crisis. We have emergency beds, we have food and drinks in there. So of course all preparations have been made, and even if there is no more emergency power, the data centers will be closed cautiously and restarted later. So the good news is that the money will stay. Bad news, the debt will stay as well. But so as banks can work, you need power, and we don't have this always. And what many just do not know, the data links, the data connections also request and require power. So 80 kilometers of a data line on power, and I think we cannot take it that during a crisis this covers the whole territory and that this data exchange works. So my advice is, I don't know what you could buy for money during a blackout, but maybe it's good to have some money at home. Okay, so a blackout is of course not only a failure of power, but it might last for some days even. So you, ERSTE Bank, you are prepared, and in the worst case nothing is feasible any longer, but after that it would be a normal and smooth restart. Yes, indeed, it's not only the cash supply but also how payment transactions can be maintained, because we have representatives of the industry and they also trade with foreign countries, so the international payment transactions have to be maintained even if there is a blackout in Austria. This is also one of our intentions, to always protect and maintain international payments, and as you say, if after a few days it goes on, then we should be prepared to give support to the economy and the citizens. So there you see that the online systems would be operational again soon. Mr. Weber, Kapsch, TrafficCom. This is a worry which also applies to you. This goes very often from analog to digital, And you had also spoken about the trade show in Dubai. And what if someone just pulls the plug? Is that the Achilles heel of digitalization? Well, I can only link up with what the previous speaker said. We have to differentiate. A full blackout is one thing, and we also have a system which follows the banking system. And of course also power, of course. If everything goes up again, the data are still there. And we also have user accounts like banks have them. But you just see the cities, if we guide everything via software, and this is the future, and then there is no power, then we have a problem. And this is also something where we should, of course, think in more sustainable terms, obviously. So, for instance, you just have a power tower or a power along the highway. I do not know why we don't use excellent systems with PV and so on, and also with all our shorter days. But it can't be done overnight. And the whole situation we have, it started on COVID, where a lot changed already. And of course we changed also entirely when it comes to how we reach our offices. We are much more flexible now. We can also now decide ourselves when can I go somewhere. We are much more flexible, and we also try to have people all over Europe, not only in Austria. We don't care who is based where. And this changes, of course, a lot. And if there is a blackout in one area, maybe in some others everything is okay. So some new strategies have to be considered, and here one has to find solutions. All crises are also an opportunity, are they? Yeah, let me take up this idea and speak to you, Association of Industrialists. There are, of course, some companies which are more energy intensive than others, and their worries are, of course, a bit bigger as regards power supply in general, and maybe also intensified due to Ukraine. We mentioned gas already, so how do you see the Austrian companies in this respect? How are they positioned, and is this maybe now an opportunity that digitalization is protected and fostered even more, because now one has to learn it and use it? Well, quite certainly, there is always cyber security. Let's just forget about the blackout now, but cyber security has always a very high learning curve, because first it's seen in the context of the critical infrastructure, whereas in the meantime all companies know that they are always and repeatedly targets of cyber attacks, meaning the companies from our perspectives try to defend themselves very well. But then there is one dimension more, which is a blackout, and the question then is, are energy intensive companies hit by this massively? Basically, if there is no more power supply, we are hit, all of us, no matter how energy intensive or not intensive we are. The longer it lasts, and I'm speaking about hours, I learned that, for instance, tunnels cannot be used any longer. So each of us, we have to see what is still possible and what isn't. And the longer it takes, in terms of days maybe even, the more difficult it will be. And we all have to take our precautions, and this is what you also learn in the context when you speak about blackouts. I think, however, though, that in cybersecurity, technologically speaking, we do see some possibilities, because it is an enormous market, obviously. And we also have technologies for this. The topic of quantum was mentioned before. If the quantum age, or when the quantum age comes, we also need the encryption which fits the quantum era, because then invoices can be processed much faster. And we should also deal with this topic as a technological opportunity in order to also foster developments in Austria and abroad. And we should never leave this field to others. And here maybe let me also come back to something which the Secretary of State has mentioned. We see in scientific institutions in Austria where there are some top topics, and that is quantum technology, for instance, and it's also the same thing in artificial intelligence. All large platform-based or American companies have no issue at all to send some PhDs there, and they are finding them even. We see that, for instance, also at the IST in Klosterneuburg, a prominent research institute, or our universities of technologies, or Innsbruck. And here, as Austria and Europe, we have to see how venture capital can also be mobilized for such investments. How can forms of cooperation with Austrian industrialists can also be used, even if it's technology which is farther away, and it does not change anything to this. But how can these technologies be developed from Austria and from Europe, and how can we do this with some allies in order not to leave this to others? And cybersecurity is a topic here, so is quantum technologies and AI. And from our perspective, we also require additional formats which maybe we are not yet having, and where we actually try to develop innovative ecosystems and embed them in order to have a cooperation with companies, but also to have some new startups from these areas and also finance them from Austria, in order then to also have technological solutions which are state of the art. Because, how should I say, we should not be naive in our technology policy and believe that systems which are offered to us would not also have some underlying systems which we do not like at all. And this also applies to the green transition. How many inverters come from Austria? How many come from elsewhere? Where does intelligence sit, so to speak? And these topics we should really take seriously. Yes, this is a threat, so to speak, of dependency on China, because 80% of solar panels come from there, for instance, and Taiwan could then also be an interesting topic. But thank you very much also first for having broached upon the topic quantum and a differentiation between cybersecurity and blackout. Deutsche Bahn, the German railways, had a standstill during the last days, presumed sabotage. Some cables were cut, and Deutsche Bahn maybe have even published this online. That is not a reassuring feeling. If you have no more power, or they have no more power, that's one thing. If someone tampers systems, it's different. So how secure are Austrian railways? Because this is critical infrastructure, is it not? Well, we have one system for the actual operations with operational headquarters, where there is, of course, enormous redundancy in all fields. And we have redundancy first with an internal system, which we have in-house. That's also within our firewalls. And we have redundancy via the public grid, where we use a NATO encryption technology in order to protect ourselves. Of course, if someone has insider knowledge and cuts a cable at the right side place, it could become difficult. Yes, this is what they presume in Germany. They still do not know who caused the problem, but this just can't be prevented if someone has insider knowledge or sells it. I don't know how many thousands of kilometers of rails you have in Austria, but you can't protect all of that. No, we can't protect all of that physically, but of course, and this is also applied cybersecurity, we learn to digitally monitor the system, and if there are anomalies or suspicious activities, we would certainly detect them. Which takes us back to you, Mr. Klauser, because there has been a major cyber attack already, and it is an interesting topic. I also spoke to your risk management team. So what happened and what were the lessons learned? Was that a crisis, for instance, which has strengthened you? Well, the lesson learned is that a very good system even can, of course, be hacked. And Estonia, I believe, also had that in its neighborhood again. So we have to see that firewalls and the whole traffic, IT traffic, is monitored accordingly so that you see whether there is any deviation and whether some data is sucked off, and Kapsch Solutions is also an important partner of ours. Not to make PR here, but just to mention them. There are many possibilities, and the lessons learned were that a certain measure of data still has to exist in the form of hard copies as well. So we have the famous A4 file, a physical file, where we can see at least who can you contact. We have this in a folder on paper, and otherwise you can't even operate, I don't know, your coffee machine if the patch doesn't work any longer. All of that was captured by us. It took us 10 days. We were excellently supported by the authorities and different institutions, Kapsch among them, and within 10 days we could stabilize the situation so far that we could go on working. So difficult 10 days, yes, difficult and expensive because you also lose a lot of money, but now we invested into most diverse technologies in order to see how data flows are and to make sure that in the future such a thing can't happen any longer. But 100% protection doesn't exist, neither for a bank nor for authorities or even military operations. Everything can be hacked, and we see it also with the war in Ukraine. Before we then see what happens in Austria, maybe let's see Estonia. Mr. Pukk, you mentioned it already. There was a large cyber attack, presumably Russian hackers against your country. I believe Estonia wanted to replace a statue and Russia wasn't happy. Some say that in 2007 one could have seen already who Vladimir Putin is, but it took everyone a while to understand. But now you say there was an attack 10 times bigger but more harmless because you were prepared. What does Estonia know, what we maybe have not yet learned but should know here in Austria and the rest of the world?
One thing that you have to remember is that our dear neighbor in the east is very unpredictable. You never know what you're going to get from there. Not too much good comes from there. So that you have to be prepared for that. And cyber attack, physical attack is one thing, but cyber attack, they can attack everybody, anybody around the world, because there are no borders, or the digital borders only. So this is one thing to remember, that this can happen every day to anybody. We know that, they say that most unsecure places in companies are the coffee corners and smoking corners because of the people. Exactly the same thing goes to digital security. As discussed before, people are usually the ones that open the door for the bad guys in the digital sense. And this is very important to educate your people. And the other thing is to keep your things as secure as possible. We have invested in Estonia very heavily during the last year, of course, during the time from 2007 when we had the attacks. We have been investing, but very heavily during the last year. And that's what helped us. And we are using the best of breed solutions in the world. We have the capability regarding people to understand what kind of threats do we have, what are the possibilities to avoid that. And that's what we keep on doing, because the technology develops that fast that the thing that is secure today is not secure tomorrow. So that's what you have to keep on investing and keep on understanding what are the threats, how can we avoid them.
Vielen Dank, Herr Pukk. Ich glaube, der junge Mann hat eine Frage. Bitte schön.
A question from a young guy. Well, as regards encryption, how do you wish to implement this so that it works efficiently? Because encryption takes a lot of time and also a lot of computing capacity and time. In order to have it efficiently, you have to have a safe exchange of keys, of encryption that is. So what do you want to do so that there is enough infrastructure for this? Because as we have seen, today's social media, or presumably safe and secure media, are not the best platform for such things, and some other encryption programs as well are not necessarily safe and secure as regards data traffic related to banks or governments. So encryption is one thing, and ecologically speaking, if you require energy storage, you need to have rare earth. So how can that be done? From the perspective of the young, we need a future, and this can not only be via the digital world if it is not ecological and sustainable enough, because all the rare earth cannot only come from the poor third world countries, and we benefit without them benefiting from it, and all that then is ecologically speaking not defendable. It's so important that also the ecology is taken into account in digitalization, because paper, for instance, needs glue, needs ink, needs some resources which up to now we have been using in this way, but due to digitalization this is shifted to rare earth. But this is also in some areas where this is not very sustainable. So what about that? And your question goes to whom? To everyone. To everyone. So, lady, gentlemen, first encryption, and second the ecological component of digitalization. Who wishes to reply to what? I can maybe start. Thanks a lot for this question. Of course, security always has a price, and if you encrypt data, you need to have more computing capacity. We very much focus on encrypting our data transfer and our data lines, and the data saved in our data centers are encrypted accordingly, and so we just accept the overheads which that means. Just one word maybe as to green IT as a header. We operate our data centers, and we also make sure that our cloud providers use green energy exclusively for their data centers. Naturally, for hardware we have to need to use rare earth. This is so, but the key driver for green IT indeed is to use specific hardware which calculates, computes as efficiently as possible. So there are calculators for efficient IT calculation operation versus the input which is needed in order to minimize that. And we try as best possible to also integrate our suppliers into these duties, so that no child labor or some other things which you have mentioned are used by our providers. So the data center is green, and we operate our data centers and infrastructure as efficiently as possible and as safe as possible. In addition to this, I'd like to come in as to ecology, because this is indeed an extremely important question. First, of course, in research we have to do a lot in order to also try and substitute rare earth. This particularly also relates to the green transition or green transformation. For instance, the battery electric drive here, cobalt is to be reduced, and progress has to be achieved. The second topic, of course, is the intention as regards data centers. The intention for renewables has to be that we try and get rare earth back into the cycle again. And this starts very soon also as to the question how a product, how a battery is composed, for instance, so that we can recycle it accordingly. And this, of course, has to go on across the different areas, because otherwise, in both topics, in the digital and the green transition, we fall into the trap of still being dependent. And thirdly, we definitely have to have a better raw materials policy.
That question, but I think the answer is in you. You are the new generation that will build all those things that you can reuse. Now we can do a lot, but a lot can be achieved more. So the new generation with the smart brains will bring the happy future for themselves. We are trying as much as possible, but that's not enough for sure.
Möchte noch jemand?
Any further addition to this? A lot has been said already. I believe that the solution can only be innovation, and the solution can also be increase of efficiency, because digitalization means to step up efficiency, and digitalization also means that luckily resources which are limited are used much better. This is why I also believe that we have to deal first with the moral aspect of this, and second also the ecological aspect. Which developments do we want to see, not see in digitalization? For instance, I think some parts of the blockchain technology should be called into question, and we really do not know whether we want to afford this and whether it makes sense. Same thing also, which moral compass would we use for digital redevelopments like artificial intelligence? In the European Union, for instance, with the next AI Act, the Act on Artificial Intelligence, where we say on purpose that certain things should not be allowed for AI, because from our perspective this doesn't fit our understanding what human beings are and can do. And this digital humanism, which together with the Czech Republic and Slovakia we have just launched a digital humanism within the European Union, which is to be established, where these very things should be added. How to deal with rare earth, what about a raw materials foreign policy? This is a topic for the future, but unfortunately, once again, we have to understand that in Europe we are the ones discussing it, and in many other parts of the world, unfortunately, it's not being discussed, which has nothing to do with the fact that we should not be front runners.
Ja, vielen herzlichen Dank für Ihren Input. Wenn ich da
Thank you very much for your input. Well, this is maybe a topic that can lead to a certain desperation, and I remember feeling the same way when I was feeling young. And a German philosopher once said, why is this ship not steered better and repaired better? Well, we have to keep one thing in mind. We're on the high seas. We have to try not to sink. And what I like about Estonia is that Estonia really is a partner we can count on as well. And a round of applause for the young man who asked the question. Now, our panel is drawing to a close, but let's look at the future. We talked about challenges and threats. But I want to talk about the positive aspects that Industry 4.0 can give us. Mr. Weber. According to you, traffic jams in big cities are superfluous. Could you maybe elaborate on that? Yes, this is our vision, and this is possible. I say this is possible, and we're working towards this in many cities. Many cities are growing, getting larger and larger. This means we are having to face new challenges. And so far, we've only considered two dimensions. We've considered the vehicle and the infrastructure. But there's one aspect that we're completely forgetting. The human being. The human beings also have to make their contributions. Now, many people benefit from flexible working times due to Corona. And this means one thing. If 10% of the residents of a city were to change their commuter behavior, we could achieve a lot with our intelligent systems. We can use people's mobile phones, integrated systems in the vehicles. We all know all these screens, and these will also be present in our vehicles. And we have to make sure that we direct traffic flows in such a way that the flows keep flowing. We've been testing our system in certain parts of Vienna. This contributes to saving CO2, and this means that people get to their destination faster. And ideally, traffic jams will be a thing of the past. This is what we're working towards. It is possible, but you really have to think holistically. You really have to take the entire mobility ecosystem into account. Mr. Pukk, having another look at Estonia. Now, digitalization, Industry 4.0, what will it bring for us?
Digitalization is a mega trend. You cannot turn it back. But if you take the human history from the very old times and put it into 24 hours, the digitalization has been there for 1 second. So we have to get used to it. It will stay probably for a longer period than just 1 second. But it takes time to understand it. What can we do with it? It has been developing very fast. And we see companies that have adopted already it in a high level. They are using AI, etc. And we see companies that are now starting to use Excel. So there's a very big difference. And probably the ones that are ahead will be ahead in the future as well. But we don't know that. We don't know what tomorrow brings. But we have to have the vision of the toolbox, the digitalization as a toolbox. You have AI, you have different possibilities, automation, digitalization, starting from Excel, ending up with the big ERP systems. That you have to pick the right tools in order to achieve your business goals. And to have a vision, what do you want to achieve? And when you do that step by step, I think we're going to do fine.
Okay, also wir müssen ein bisschen auch gewohnt werden.
Yes, we just have to get into the habit. State Secretary, you talked about a goal. We have to see eye to eye with the administration, and the administration really also has to do its part. I think this is a very good vision. But how do you see things? What will digitalization bring for us? Prosperity. And I already said this at the beginning. I think digitalization will determine whether Europe remains a prosperous continent. During the past few months, we talked a lot about this. We talked a lot about how, to us, it's unthinkable that we might actually make a step back as far as prosperity is concerned, that prosperity might actually decrease. Digitalization will play a decisive role in that. Very important. Mr. Klauser. PALFINGER already is a front runner. Now, prosperity already is a very positive aspect. What other positive aspects will digitalization bring, do you think? Well, yes, prosperity, of course. But, well, just success in general, to work towards the future successfully, speedily, and digitalization will enable us to bring solutions to the market faster, to speed up development processes. All of this is a multiplier. We have the necessary talent, and digitalization will act as a multiplier. And if we get things right, and I think we're focusing on young people here today, and this is why I would invite them to also play their part. We have to be better than others. And this means that we'll be successful and will live in prosperity in the future. Mr. Garstenauer, you already said that digitalization will mean that rail mobility will increase. What are the positive aspects that you envisage for digitalization? Well, I'd like to mention 3 points. And these are concrete projects that we're working on. First, we have a central operating system. That's our schedule, our integrated frequency schedule. And based on this, we've been developing systems. And we work with AI in order to optimize the schedule and our personnel usage in order to be able to do more with fewer resources. And we've identified strategic points in our network, and we've set up metering systems. And this means that we determine the point in time where exactly when a train needs to go into maintenance. And we're developing an algorithm that is based on data that we've garnered in the past to deal with deviations. Just in case there's an incident, we can go back to a regular schedule as quickly as possible. So we really have a consistent process management. This is the basis of our work. Our railway system is quite good, and we really want to be at the very top in the future. Thank you very much, Ms. Meran-Waldstein. What are the positive aspects that you see for the future? Well, one thing is quite clear. Digitalization creates opportunities for an innovative, competitive industry of the future. But, and I'm really calling upon the young people here present today, this won't be possible without the right talents. And these are, and I'm really talking about the STEM subjects here. Now, we need the STEMs if we are to continue to develop our innovative processes. Now, these are very innovative jobs, very future-oriented jobs. This will give you the opportunity to design the solutions of the future. So, focus on the STEM subjects. We're a part of many initiatives that exist today, and I think this really is the leverage for innovation in this very challenging but also exciting area that is really turned to the future. Isabella, many positive things have already been said. I know you have 2 daughters, and I think it's important to you personally as well, for young people to take the opportunities that they have. And this young man has said it. Young people really have the brains that we need. But yes, let me build on this. We have 2,000 IT experts working in our company. We're one of the biggest IT employer in the region, and we'll recruit 300 more IT experts next year. And if there's one thing that keeps me awake at night, it's the following: how can we get the talents in order to implement all the visions that have been mentioned now? I think the federal government has taken a right first step when it introduced the subject of basic IT education. But we have to build on that. Let me just mention the Nordic countries, but this is a subject that's also more focused on in Slovakia, for example. And we need more polytechnic universities, Fachhochschulen, in order to focus on that subject more. IT security, I think demand for IT security experts will skyrocket in the next number of years. We have IT rules that are coming up and that will affect thousands of companies in Austria, and I think there will really be a shortage of IT specialists in Austria. Yeah, I think, and I'm convinced really, that we need a positive image campaign for IT jobs. Many people think, strangely enough, that IT kills jobs, but I think we really need a positive image campaign. If you have an IT education today, this means that you'll have a guaranteed job in the future. Well, this is an interesting conclusion. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for this interesting debate. I think we've earned a round of applause. Thank you.
Ja, meine
Ladies and gentlemen, now before we leave these halls, thank you very much again to the participants of this very interesting panel. And thank you also to Werner Seika, to our moderator. It's not easy to moderate a panel of this size. Thank you very much. Congratulations. You've really done a great job.
Danke.
Meine Damen und
Ladies and gentlemen, at 6:30 the bus will leave and bring us to the location of our evening program. The brewery Klostermühlen. We'll enjoy good food and drinks there. I hope to see every one of you there. And then